I have this vision of like humanity ascending a cliff toward the golden land, and my generation couldn't quite make it, but the next generation reaches over the lip of the cliff and grabs a root and hauls himself up, and I'm still down here. Well, I'm happy for you, but what about me? And then they reach a hand down and they pull me up as well. And even the generation before me, like, we're kind of pulling each other up. That a leader is somebody who holds a vision of what can be so strongly that he or she is able to hold it on behalf of others. Anything that requires somebody else besides yourself demands this kind of leadership. You can do a lot more than you give yourself credit for. You are more beautiful than you know. And not as an item of spiritual dogma, but to actually see that in somebody and to keep that vision even when they doubt it. That creates opportunities for others to give their gifts, because here is a receptacle for the gifts. Here's a direction that the gifts can go toward.
Charles Eisenstein, welcome to the podcast, brother. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
Oh, gosh. I feel like I should make up something that I'm excited about. I'm not really in an excited phase right now. I'm more in a phase of feeling like I'm kind of standing at a crossroads. I could continue on the path that I've been on, but there's some forking branches that I might take too. And so I think maybe I'll get excited when I decide which path to walk.
Wow.
But yeah, it's not always about being excited.
Yeah, I would love to explore that, because you mentioned in all of the amazing work that you're doing right now, which, for me, it's basically a catalyst for a new world that's emerging, a new consciousness that's emerging right now. And you mentioned this fork in the road, this crossing of paths that humanity as a collective is going into. We're kind of in this sacred space between stories, as you call them. So I wanted to explore with you, what is this crossroads that humanity is in right now? What are we experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, we're experiencing it on a kind of a collective level, where about the whole direction of society, we don't really necessarily have a future that we can coherently envision that we are excited about. Mm-hmm. We look toward technological progress, but are we really excited about, jetpacks and implantable electronics and all that kind of stuff? The way that we were in the 70s, in the 80s, where the future was this glorious destination and life is going to get better and better. Like, I don't think that we really have that excitement. And so on a personal level too, a lot of people, especially young people, are kind of at a crossroads also. Pausing before they choose a path, because the paths that are offered to them, the legacy of previous generations that say, here's how to live, here's how to do it, those aren't that appealing. They don't resonate with the soul's knowledge of why you're here. And that's not true for everybody. Okay. Some people are very, very clear. I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm here. And here's the path to do it. But if that's not you, if you're not, excited and motivated to take the next step that you're told that you're supposed to take, maybe that's not a problem. Maybe that is a sign of your spiritual well-being.
Yeah.
And maybe you have to actually go through that part of, no, it's not this, it's not that, it's not that. I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to stay here, trusting that when the next step does appear, that is for me, that I will know it and recognize it.
You call that the case of the fuck it's, where you see a lot of people in procrastination and laziness, going through the motions. And that's really showing that the old story, the old paradigm is not motivating a lot of people anymore. Maybe it's still motivating the people that have been in habit of, going through that story, going through what society has told us that we should pursue, and all these things that really aren't that connected to the source. They're rooted in separation, from the biological theories of Darwin, and then in science, Newton have been telling us that we're separate from this collective source for many years. So I wanted to ask you, and I want to read this quote that I read in the book, The More Beautiful World Our Heart Knows Is Possible, is the time to do is when you know what to do. When you don't know what to do and act anyway, you are probably acting out of habit. So how can we come into attention and awareness whenever we're coming into these habits and don't know what to do exactly?
Yeah, it's funny that you phrase that as a how-to question. But true. I feel like the quote that you read already has the answer. It doesn't tell you how, but by just illuminating that, something changes.
Yes.
And the habit becomes revealed. And anytime that a habit is revealed, it weakens, because now you have awareness on it. It's no longer unconscious. You still might do it, but you might be like, oh, I did it again. Yep, there's that habit again. And over time, it does loosen its hold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting you said that, because right as you mentioned that, I came into, memory of all the times I've asked how-to questions on the podcast. And there are probably more how-to questions than just, even maybe why questions or questions that go above the practicality of what we're supposed to be, aka doing. Yeah. So it's really interesting you mentioned that. And there's this importance in stillness that I've heard you speak upon, of stillness to acquire and remember these true purposes that we're here for. Has there been any moment in your life, maybe even now in this transitory state, where you found yourself in moments of stillness and come into profound insights or realizations of what's next?
Well, there's a kind of a mental stillness, but also a life stillness, where you're just not motivated to do very much. Maybe you continue in your job and your routines, but you're kind of stepped back from those, watching yourself go through them, not really invested in them, not really identifying with them. That's a kind of a stillness too. Yeah. And that's or you could say it's also an emptiness. And it's into the stillness or into the emptiness that something new can arise. And to take it back to the how-to, how to, that can be a useful question. If you're learning how to, install plumbing, for example, or do something very practical. Huh. But as I think that in these times of intense change, especially generational change, where the how-tos of 30 years ago, for example, to be successful and fulfilled in life, here's how to do it. You take the honors classes, you take the AP credits, you go to a good college, then you go to grad school, and then you're launched.
That linear thinking.
Yeah, but also like that educational model.
Yes.
That doesn't bring you to the place that it used to 30 or 40 years ago. So a lot of the old how-tos are disempowering, because you're saying, you tell me, I want my instructions to come from the outside. And also they're inaccurate because times have changed. And that's why it's important today to access other sources of information. And that's where the stillness comes in, where you disengage from all of the maps and models that have been given to you. And maybe some of them are right and accurate, and you return to them after you've gone through the stillness. I'm not talking about like throwing out everything from the past. That actually is in a mindset of the past. If the hippie generation, out with the old, in with the new, novelty, change, new, youth, all about, it's a repudiation of ancestry, of lineage, of history.
Elders.
of the elders. Yeah. And so, like, paradoxically, that is one of the old things that we actually, that's an inaccurate map of the past. So I hope you can hear, like, there's a paradox here.
Definitely.
And paradox is a beautiful ally to bring us into stillness, because it just stops the mind and says, hold on, there's something that my concepts cannot comprehend.
Yes. And you mentioned, like, the education system, for example, and we look at other systems like healthcare, other institutions right now in the world, the religious institutions. And when we go about, like, creating a new story for those institutions, we tend to think about exactly the how to change it. And then I've noticed, and just, reading on your work, there's underlying kind of baseline of the level of consciousness that humanity is at, the level of consciousness that, in a way needs to transform completely. The meta crisis, everything that's going on in the world right now, to get to the depth of it. And you've mentioned, like, we just have to get to the root and really truly find what's going on underneath, maybe any, shallow little changes that we can make in policies and foreign policies and things like that. So when you're looking at the depth of the level of consciousness that humanity is at, what can you speak upon on that?
I think our consciousness has progressed way beyond the institutions that contain us. Very few people, it's not just like some enlightened avant-garde, but most people, the majority, do not feel at home in the world that has been built around us over many, many generations. It's not just the young people. Excuse me. The older generation, I guess I'm Generation X. What your generation is experiencing kind of started with ours. The earlier generation, the baby boom generation, they were still in the ascent phase, the rising phase of Western civilization. In fact, they were at the pinnacle of it. When they came of age in the 60s, and there was nothing we couldn't do. We were going to conquer the universe.
Yeah.
And that, even like the hippie ideals were still this kind of progression of civilization. And that the real betrayal set in during my generation. So it's not just, a few people. This is a consciousness that is alien to our economic institutions, to our, educational institutions. You go there and you get treated like as cattle, and there's all these online forms, page after page you have to fill out, and all this rigmarole, and it's so dehumanizing. Yeah. And like the idea of grades, that, like, I'm going to take a bunch of unique, diverse human beings and order them onto a linear scale. Like, that is ridiculous. That does not fit our consciousness.
Yeah.
The consumer culture, the way that patients are treated in the medical system is also very much alike to the educational system. All of it is out of alignment with our consciousness. And, people get older, and eventually you make, what has been the case is, you make your compromises, and you become accustomed to a cage in which you do not fit. And, the virtue of youth is that you're in a reality of, no, I'm not going to do that. It's called idealism, which is then, dismissed and and degraded as, oh, it's just youthful idealism, you'll grow out of it. It makes older people uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable because it actually suggests their own lost or suppressed idealism and recalls them to a time when they said, no, I'm never going to conform to something so misaligned with my soul.
What
So
beats that out of us? Or are there any forces that do? Or
it never actually dies. There's always a spark, an ember of it. But disappointment after disappointment, failure after failure, and also the surrounding culture that tells you that it's illegitimate, that you're naive, that you're crazy, that you're irresponsible, that you're impractical. But in fact, pretty much anything worth doing in this world is a little bit naive. Someone's going to say, well, it's impractical because no one's doing that. Why do you think you can do it? You got to be a little bit naive to believe that you can do something that has not yet been done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that ember that you mentioned, that we all have within us, that kind of flame inside that really gets sparked by the power of community. And we're talking about the stories that are shaping humanity right now, and how we're kind of in this in between, going to a new story, but we don't know quite yet what it is or what it's going to be about. But you mentioned that this old story does have a power to draw us back into it very easily, because people themselves can't hold it individually. They need a group, they need a community. So, speaking on that, the community aspect, what have you found that helps people find the others just like them, and helps people awaken, and maybe not just like them, because I know there's a power in meeting people from completely different ends of the spectrum, and completely different belief systems, and completely different backgrounds. But how can we start to cultivate this community aspect back into our lives, this longing of belonging that we have?
I mean, again, a how-to question, but it's really more of magnetizing it to us through gratitude for all of those moments where we do experience it.
Yes.
And those experiences are becoming more and more frequent, which I'm grateful for, because the consciousness is rising in so many places, and each generation, it walks as far as it can and crumples with exhaustion and age. But that's the place that they struggled so hard to reach that the next generation is born into. I recently saw a social media post that about this woman and her 10-year-old was having all kinds of behavior problems, like angry all the time, and had bitter memories of his alcoholic father leaving when he was 3 years old. And he had been angelic up until then, but then when the father left, he had all these meltdowns, and was just really angry all the time. And on one morning, he said to his mother, I realized last night that the reason I'm angry all the time is that I am afraid to experience happiness because I'm afraid that it's going to be taken away. And I'm really very sad, but it's more comfortable for me to be angry. A 10-year-old said that. I didn't have the vocabulary or the self-awareness to say anything like that until I was probably in my 30s, and it took an awful lot of learning and practice and development to get to a point where I could even conceive of such a thing.
Huh.
And here's a 10-year-old, and you're kind of maybe in between those generations, but I see all the time in people, who are much younger than myself, that this kind of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, this kind of sophistication, it's second nature. So the more that, and it brings me up to that level.
Yeah.
I have this vision of like humanity ascending a cliff toward the golden land, and my generation couldn't quite make it, but the next generation reaches over the lip of the cliff and and, grabs a root and hauls himself up. And I'm still down here, well, I'm happy for you, but what about me? And then they reach a hand down and they pull me up as well. And even the generation before me, like we're kind of pulling each other up. And also launching, my generation, like you're standing on my shoulders and pushing yourself.
100%.
I've got to be solid for that. And I have to trust your capacity. So it's that's how the evolution is working right now. Yeah. And so it does speak to your question about community. It's, you go up there and there's others who join you and hold you in a story that, is, as I said, contrary to the economic system, contrary to the medical system, contrary to the educational system. Like, it takes more than just your own will to hold different values and beliefs. It is a community function. And I am grateful that our hundreds of generations of efforts are bearing fruit.
Yeah. I'm curious, where did that vision of the cliff for you come from? When did you download that vision?
It just came to me when I was interacting with a young woman who just I was like, holy crap, I can't believe that you exist. It was just one of these moments that made me very optimistic that we are progressing as a species in a very different way than the old technological utopians foresaw. Our progress isn't toward more rationality, more precision, more metrics, more science, more laws, more order. It's not about that at all.
You talked about this a little bit with Aubrey Marcus on a podcast you guys did, where you guys got to the point where it was like these monks that are, sitting on mountaintops and, downloading this universal consciousness, and, why aren't they out here helping, us in the day to day? And you talked about the concept of the morphic resonance, the morphic fields by Rupert Sheldrake. And, when you talked about the 10-year-old, that thought came to mind, because it was like, where is that level of awareness coming from? Is it already in the field, in the quantum field? Are they tapping into that awareness already, or are they just not buying into the illusions of the old story? What is going on there?
Yeah, they're tapping into a rising consciousness. They're expressing something that's in the field, and the field has been generated by the countless efforts of people striving to raise themselves out of the muck of separation for thousands of years. And those efforts that seem hopeless and unrecognized, and they seem like they didn't change anything, they do change the field. And then you have people being born into a very high place right now, that then they can also pull the rest of us up. Like that 10-year-old, like he's pulling me up. Like I hear that story and it awakens something in me.
And I told you, my family and I'm from Colombia, and where we live, there are a lot of indigenous tribes, in the area, and I've heard so many stories of how government institutions and figures treat and negotiate with these indigenous people through their land, and what they can use or what they can use to drill oil here and there and things like that. And you mentioned something so special about the indigenous tribes in the book, which was their mission in many ways is to survive long enough to provide living examples of how to be human. What can we learn about indigenous tribes?
Well, earlier you and I, we were speaking of the function of community and holding a different story. Well, the indigenous hold a story that is very different from that of civilization, a different story of what a human being is, a different story of how change happens in the world, a different story of what is real and possible. And as our dominant story breaks down, we really need the nourishment of other stories. We need confirmation that, we have been trapped in a very narrow band of reality here. And there's a lot more that's possible than we have been willing to believe. And, for example, the knowledge that the world is full of being and that consciousness and intelligence and purpose are not the sole province of humans. That knowledge has been lost, very much lost in modern science, in modern society, in modern thought. A vestige of it still exists, and it's much stronger in children. If you say to a child, the sun is watching you right now, that doesn't seem like nonsense. But to an astrophysicist, that seems like nonsense. To, on a high school science classroom, that seems like nonsense. So that's one of the core pieces of knowledge that is suppressed, crushed, removed from people in modern society. But Indigenous people, by and large, almost universally, I would say, hold on to that knowledge, that the world is full of being, that we're not the only beings in fullness in the world. And that alone, like if we really took that in, it would transform modern civilization completely. Because most of the harm that we do is enabled, permitted by the ignorance that we're actually harming beings. It's just a bunch of lumber. It's just a bunch of coal. We don't see it as a sacred being. Yeah. And just that shift of perception. And because we don't, then to quote, save the world, we need to be bribed and threatened. Oh, we have to take better care of the Amazon, otherwise we're going to die. Otherwise, we're going to suffer economic losses. Otherwise, we're going to be deprived of medicines that can be developed. Otherwise, climate change is going to destroy humanity. These would be unnecessary. As unnecessary as if, like Emilio, if I said, well, I've got a 9-year-old, why should I take care of him? Why should I feed him? And you say, well, Charles, if you don't, then he'll grow up to hate you. And, the CPS will come and charge you with neglect. And I say, okay, I guess I'll take care of him. Like that whole conversation betrays a problem.
Yes.
Which is that I'm not seeing him as a beloved. Well, same thing we do to the earth. So this is, we don't see it as a beloved. Therefore, we have to bribe and threaten ourselves into taking care of it.
Yeah.
Well, so that's one of the core pieces of knowledge that Indigenous people have preserved so that it can come back, feed back into our own upwelling consciousness that never truly died of the intelligence in all things.
And it's that layer of perception that the Indigenous people are able to see and experience the world with, that they recognize that interconnectedness. So, it's not like, oh, we should take care of the earth or we should take care of other people because kind of we have to, or, out of obligation, but it's a sense of they're all interconnected beings with us. And Charles, when I tune into you, I get a sense that, you're speaking from a very deep place of knowing that, these perceptions that you're talking about from the Indigenous people, you've had a glimpse of as well. And I wanted to ask you, because I know you went to Yale and you were trying to solve all these problems from intellect and reason. And what I get the sense of is that when you speak about interconnectedness, interbeing, all these new elements of a story that's emerging in the world and a new perception, you've had a deep sense of experience and interaction with them. How does that land for you?
Well, there are many ways that these realizations come to us. and grow within us. And it's not only through, indigenous cultures.
Yes.
That's one. But it's also through other revelatory experiences. For me, like psychedelics played a huge role in awakening me to realities beyond what I had been educated into.
Yeah.
There's also wisdom lineages within Western culture. And, it's not just Western, it's civilization as a whole. So there's wisdom lineages that also have carried and preserved true knowledge, carried it to the present time. There's that knowledge also is encoded into songs and stories that are thousands of years old, actually. Some of the fairy tales, some of the myths, they pop up in similar form again and again and again. Like, where do those come from?
Yeah, like the
those
hero's journey.
Vehicles. That's one example. Yeah. Although I think that the hero's journey is not actually the primary guiding myth of the coming time. It's the hero is a boy archetype,
yes.
not a man archetype. It's not really mature.
Ooh.
But it's still, a beautiful and necessary myth.
Love that.
And so that's an example of this knowledge that's been encoded in various ways, even in, and it's in the field, as we were talking about before, that as it grows, it becomes more and more accessible. So the long efforts of many generations are paying off now because it's becoming so available. That's why these 10-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds are born into it and inhabiting it as second nature because of the field that's been generated. So there's many, many ways that this knowledge can come to people. And the practice is to trust it, is to actually trust what you know, even when it doesn't get immediate confirmation or reward from authority, from the system. Mm-hmm.
When I read A Gathering of the Tribe, or also listened to it with the animation you guys did, wow. I'm like, whoa, where did that information come from? And you said it in your website, I know that my books and other work come from a deep, inspired source, but that source is not me. It is more like I'm connecting to a field of knowledge or to a story that wants to be told. And, on the show, we've had a lot of channelers, empaths, people like Paul Selig, and it's connecting.
Just reading one of his books right now.
No way. Literally
right before our conversation, I was thumbing through his new book. Yeah.
The guides are here with us.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But yeah, back to that concept of tuning in to information from, other realms or even unseen forces that we can't see. I think that's key for the new story to come in, and we essentially need to open ourselves up to receive information. And I've struggled with this of like letting the intellect aside for a minute, not being so like engaged with my mind, but with my heart when I'm, for example, reading Paul Selig's books or your books. And it's the information is received in a different way. Let me tell you, when it comes from a place of, I'm not trying to understand it with my mind, with my intellect, but it's coming in and it's resonating with the truth in my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes like for me, I tend to, I like to engage the intellect in my writing, but it's almost like a trick. I engage your intellect so that it's occupied and so that the other information, which is carried by the cadence and the humor, and the voice, and the intention behind it can get in.
Yeah.
The Gathering of the Tribe story, as for where did it come from? I really have learned that stories are beings in and of themselves. This was a story that wanted to be told. It's, in a sense, a true story, and it recruited me to tell it. because I had been playing in the playground where it lives. The playground that I had been exploring in the book that you referenced.
Yes.
The more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. And so, the story's like, oh, okay, here's a guy, so it gave itself to me with the instruction that I tell it. And it took me a little while to really arrive at its complete telling. I told it, to audiences and stuff, and it kind of just emerged. The more that I got to know it, the more it showed itself to me. And so, yeah, there it is. I'm not the creator of that story, but I was recruited by the story to tell the story.
And you said that
I guess,
go ahead.
I just want to say, like, people tend to make this harder than it really is. Like something you said is like, okay, what we need to do is open ourselves to like, okay, maybe, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but just this energy of this hard slog, like this, we need to do this, we need to do that. When so much is available as a gift, and the habit of making it hard, like you can still receive the gift.
Yeah.
It's like here comes Paul Selig, with a gift held out in his two hands, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do 30 push-ups and I can receive this. Like, okay, that'll work.
Yeah.
You could do your 30 push-ups and then take the gift, but you don't necessarily have to. One of the habits that we've received from the past is a thought form, life is hard. And the habit then is struggle.
Yes.
It's baked into, standard biology, the struggle to survive. It's baked into the economic system. You have to do stuff you don't want to do, and then you are compensated for it. It's the idea of work in an industrial setting. Like work is something objectionable, and you seek to work as little as possible so that you can do the other stuff called leisure. Like all of these divisions are part of life is hard. And sometimes life is hard. But as like a default way of seeing the world, it ends up creating hardship where in situations where there need not be hardship because we're so accustomed to it. So I just wanted to, illuminate that, like bring some consciousness to that and, let that consciousness do its work.
Yeah. And it's almost like we feel like we need to work hard because we're separate from the thing that we're trying to achieve. And it's a completely different, teaching when you have the embodiment of like that thing out there is already connected to me. I just have to draw it in, based on a lot of like work I've been doing with Dr. Joe Dispenza and things like that. It's like you become that magnet attracting, and we're no longer in this constant state of separation. I wanted to read to you, we were talking about gathering of the tribe, this one point where it says, "The heat you will generate will rekindle the same spark that lies in every human being, for in truth, each one is from a tribe like ours. The whole galaxy and beyond is converging on Earth, for never before has a planet journeyed so far into separation and made it back again. Those of you who go will be part of a new step in cosmic evolution." And every one of us here, I think answered that call or volunteered in a way to be here, as that story goes. And why when we read those words of never before has a planet journeyed so far into separation and made it back again, why has that been the case on Earth right now?
That's the nature of this planet. I can't answer that with a why. It's just the way it is. Yeah. That's what this planet is. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
It's important. That's another answer to where this story came from. I needed to hear the story myself. Because a lot of times I'm like, what am I doing here? Why have I come to this place that is so out of alignment with what I hold true and beautiful and valid? Why? Like, I just sometimes feel so at home here that I just want to get out of this place and just, have done with the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's where the story reminds me that, I volunteered to come here. And it doesn't make me like a savior because other people didn't. Actually, on some level, everybody volunteered to come here. All of these divine souls came to live out the life journeys that are available to live out here and to gain wisdom from those journeys. Like you live, like you're plunging into the drama, you play a role. Oh yeah, I'll play that role. I'll be that actor. I will play it so deeply that I will forget that I'm even acting. I'll fully identify with this. I'll live this life journey, whatever it is. And then I kind of report back to base, bringing a thread with me. And the only way to bring that thread back to the loom is to actually go there. And you create the thread by living a life. And somebody has to come and live that life. And all of these stories, every story that can possibly happen to a human being on Earth is unique and necessary to weave the tapestry and for it to be complete. So that the next project can begin that is enriched and beautified by the previous project. Like there's a reason why we're doing all of this. So when I remember that, and then the story helps me remember that. Like that's the thing. Like it makes me more willing to be alive and be fully present in the world here. Even though the story is kind of about, we're not really of this place, yet it has the opposite effect. It's not about transcending, and becoming, and repudiating materiality, and becoming more spiritual. It's quite the opposite. It's like, no, we came here for an important reason. So let's fully be here and perform the function that we came here to do.
And it's also, I got the thought of like the archetypes where people are living out different lives and different experiences, but there's almost like an overarching archetype or many archetypes that people are living out at the same time. We see that in like tarot cards and astrology and, all these different human design, all these different things. And I wanted to ask you, based on archetypes, what you believe or feel that will be an archetype of this new era that's emerging in the world right now.
Okay, so in our intention setting before our conversation, I set the intention to really connect with like the humanity, like the reality of the people listening, not as an abstract audience where I'm just saying my thing, And in this moment, I'm noticing this kind of perverse impulse to like give you the answer. It's part of my training in school, okay, show that you're smart, show that you have the right answer, show that you can answer this question. And so I'm just pausing actually right now. And thinking, okay, where is my speech coming from? And is that really what I want to say right now? Tuning into you, Emilio, but also to all the people standing behind you, listening through your ears, I guess I would answer with what in you seeks the answer to that question.
I feel like there is this longing of like clarity of, diving into, even like mystical teachings and metaphysical teachings about like archetypes, and we hear so much about archetypes. And I've even identified when I'm doing, some type of therapy and things like that, of like, what archetype am I activating right now?
Really?
And I tend to see that it's helped me gain clarity of, okay, what it encompasses this archetype? Why am I acting it out? How am I experiencing it right now? And how can I work with it to, awaken something or activate something? And there is a lot of power with acknowledging the archetypes that are playing out in the world and in our day-to-day lives. So I guess that was like, the question came from a place of a lot of curiosity, a lot of curiosity of if there is or will there be an archetype that we might be able to attune with or activate more and more in the years and in the era to come, that'll help this transition to the new story.
Yeah. I mean, there are archetypes that they wax and wane, they come and go, new ones are born, old ones die, or they take new form, they take on new life. Like the archetype of the priest, the magician, the ceremonialist, the priestess. Some of them are very old archetypes, but they were kind of like, they change form, like the priest morphed into the scientist for a while. Like they with their white lab coats, and their incomprehensible language, and their own society, like and the inscrutable rituals they perform to divine truth, which they then tell everybody else. So I don't know if I can name any new archetypes, but it's about reclaiming some of these archetypes from their old form. Revitalizing them. Like even the king or the queen, I think these are actually becoming very important archetypes in a new sense that is not about domination, but it is about service to the kingdom. So in that expression, the king doesn't even need to be acknowledged as a king, because he's so confident in his rule. And how does the rule, does he exercise it? It is through command, which I think come with, right? What does that actually mean? To speak with? I don't know. There's like something to explore there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I do feel like I see where your question's coming from now. It's like, how do we, like, what are the models that can guide us? In being human when so many of the old models are no longer useful.
And it's that, I heard you use a lot the word change maker, and especially there's this feeling of lack of leadership, and even in the highest authority ranks, in society, coming from like a hierarchical perspective. And one thing I read in the book was, you said a leader is someone who creates opportunities for others to give their gifts. So we tend to think of like the leader as like, oh, the one that goes first. And, I think there's a place for that type of leader, but the leader that offers themselves in service, as you just mentioned, to help people unlock whatever gift they have to give in this lifetime. What's the power of gifts? And why are gifts so important in the world right now?
Well, let me talk about leadership first, and maybe that'll go into that. Since I wrote the book, another aspect of leadership has come up very strongly in my awareness, which is that a leader is somebody who holds a vision of what can be so strongly that he or she is able to hold it on behalf of others. Could be a vision of, a project, of an organization. Could also be a vision of a person, or it could be of a production of a film, of a musical. anything that requires somebody else besides yourself demands this kind of leadership. And one aspect of it is to hold another person in what they can become, and to not buy into a self-limiting story that they might carry about their own lack, about their own incapacity, and to recognize, actually, that's not true. You can do a lot more than you give yourself credit for. You are more beautiful than you know. And not as an item of spiritual dogma, but to actually see that in somebody and to keep that vision, even when even when they doubt it. And everybody else says, what you are seeing is impossible, but it's not bravado. You know that it is possible because you've seen it, and you hold that. That capacity is called leadership. Wow. And that creates opportunities for others to give their gifts, because here is a receptacle for the gifts. Here's a direction that the gifts can go toward. People need that. People need not only to express their gifts, but also to express them towards something that is meaningful to them, which is why, a challenging job doing something meaningless doesn't satisfy you. Yeah. Whether could be very highly paid, very prestigious, top law firm, Wall Street, whatever. But if in the back of your mind, it's like, but this isn't actually serving anything I care about, it's not enough, right? To express your gifts. They have to go towards something meaningful. So that's what leadership wants to become in our time. And it's necessary because the default is very often toward expressions of our gifts that are not meaningful. So, yeah. And when that happens, to circle back to your question, we shrivel up. We become unhealthy. We become depressed, because that is why we're here. We are here to create, to participate in creation. And we are equipped with magnificent gifts to do that. And we are put in a precise role, in a precise circumstance where we can do that. And, sometimes we get stuck and we're not doing that. And all of our traumas and limitations and circumstances are constricting us, but maybe a leader can open up an avenue of expression. And then we're alive. We're living what we are here to live. And it's tremendously liberating. Yeah.
What gifts do you feel that are coming through you right now, in this lifetime for you?
So yeah, I'm going to maybe take that question in a slightly different sense than you intended it, but really, like taking at face value gifts.
Yes.
Which are things that I've received and that then I can pass on. So a tremendous gift has been confirmation of my inner knowing that enables me to speak from it. And it's not like my inner knowing is any better than anybody else's, but I've had the fortune at key moments to have it confirmed.
Yeah.
Through a father, for example, who was an ardent environmentalist and who confirmed my knowing that there's something terribly wrong about the way we're treating nature. Through psychedelic medicines that confirmed my knowing that reality is a lot bigger than we were told. Through humble people who intersected my life at key moments, who confirmed that the power to create change does not depend on how much money and institutional status
and influence and followers and all that. You're mentioning the man in Taipei that owned the motorcycle shop. That story was touching for sure.
Yeah. So these are gifts that I've received that have grounded me very strongly in a field of knowledge that is a bit countercultural. That otherwise I might not be able to speak so compellingly about, and carry the vibration of that field and of the possibility for humanity that it represents.
Does courage play a role in that for you?
Yeah, I mean, courage comes from connection to the heart's knowledge. Courage isn't actually so much about overcoming fear. Yeah. I've in the last couple of years had some experiences of this where my behavior looked cowardly, but it wasn't because I was in fear. It was because I was in conflict internally. And when I came to clarity and I was connected to my deep, heartfelt convictions, then my actions changed, and I did things that looked brave. But it wasn't about fear. It was about a resolution of a conflict inside.
Yes. And we were having a conversation yesterday on the podcast with Danielle Laporte. She said that the French word for courage is coute, which means heart.
Yeah.
And it's like when you have this inner knowing in the heart, I feel like the steps that come out of that, writing the book or launching the podcast, they come so naturally that I feel that fear no longer has such a strong grip. So I wanted to just mention that because I know there is a lot of fear with going a separate path or counterculture or doing things in your unique way. That whoever's tuning in, it's really about just connecting with your heart space and feeling what gifts are there in there for you, to be able to kind of just give out to the world and do it from a place of soul, do it from a place of this place that I guess the opposite would be ego, in a way, where we try to come at it of like, what can I get if I put this book out there, or if I, share this episode, or if I do that, like, what can I get out of it? When it's coming from the heart, I feel like there isn't a lot of that in there. There is none. There is none of that in there. Brother, the time of reunion is here, as you've said. What is humanity ready to hear about with regards to the reunion? What concepts and stories are we ready to hear right now in this present moment?
Yeah, I began really working with the concept of reunion when I wrote my first book, The Ascent of Humanity, in the early 2000s. And I came to understand like all of the bad things happening in the world as coming from a story of separation, separation from each other, separation from the body, separation from nature, separation from God. And the turnaround point is where we begin to heal the separation and reunite with all that has been separated off. So we rebuild community, we rebuild authentic relationships, we rebuild the larger self of nature, of ecosystems. We participate in that. We no longer seek to transcend and leave nature behind and become the lords and masters of creation. Each person a separate fortress. Like all of that turns around. So reunion is the recovery of all of our lost parts. Understanding that who we are, and this is the deepest level of it, and who we are is not separate. That we have exiled most of what we are. And now it's time to reclaim it. And so as we rebuild relationships, because we are relationship, we become more and more whole. So that's like kind of the philosophical background to it. What else can I say about it, though? Do you want to? Is there something else you wanted to me to bring into it, or?
Yeah. So in the book, in The More Beautiful World, you mentioned about the unmet needs that we have, and really understanding the core depth of what are those unmet needs. A lot of those coming from, creativity, service, intimacy, connection, play, what you just mentioned. What are the consequences of suppressing these unmet needs that, are in our soul's desire to express?
Well, when we're in a situation where the needs are not met, or very hard to meet, then we turn toward any available substitute that can, so that's why lonely people might overeat. Because eating food gives them a momentary sense of connection. That's why people who are in physical pain might, take narcotics or drink alcohol, because it gives them a feeling of being okay. People who are in a dead-end life might become addicted to gambling, because it gives them a sense of untrammeled possibility and adventure. So a lot of the behaviors that we condemn are merely symptoms of a situation of, separation, of institutionalized separation. I mean, it's not like you got a bad idea and thought yourself separate.
Yeah.
That's like that war against the self is also part of separation. And it mirrors the war on nature. So it's not like this whole attitude of, okay, let's find something to blame. That's also a mind form of separation.
Yeah.
And reunion is to just have compassion for yourself, to understand that who I am and what I have done is a product of my circumstances, and that will change and is changing right now because my circumstances have changed. What has changed in my circumstances? It's that a new piece of information has been integrated into my being.
Yes.
And that new piece of information is compassion. It's the understanding of what I just said. And then choice becomes available where it was not available before.
Yeah. And bringing into awareness the program of control, which, your newest book, The Coronation, is really, this series of essays around what you went through in the despair during coronavirus, during COVID-19, and everything that you were seeing from, are we headed towards totalitarianism? What can we think of that? And I wanted to ask about this program of control and kind of revealing it so that if a situation arises in the coming years where, whether it's another pandemic, whether it's a natural disaster, how can we be becoming more empowered to not fall into that trap of the program of control, or even shifting the mindset completely of, do we need that program instilled in our day-to-day lives in order to feel safe or feel like, we're protected from an outside force?
So the orientation, like the program of control, comes from an orientation toward fear. And the orientation of fear comes from who we imagine ourselves to be in modern society, in modern civilization, and what we think the world is and what we think the nature of reality is. Fear is baked into that. It's baked into, I'm a separate self, separate from nature, separate from each other, in constant competition, in struggle to survive. And I will, regardless of anything, be annihilated like a candle flame being snuffed out upon my physical death, because I am nothing more and nothing other than a meat machine generating an illusory consciousness. Like, if you accept these supposedly scientific tenets of existence, then fear is the water in which you swim. And control then it comes from that fear, and then it intensifies that fear. It's part of the program. It's another way to put it is that it's quite natural, if you believe that we are the only intelligence here, and that we are battling the random forces of nature and the hostile other self-interest maximizing beings, such as bacteria and viruses and predators. Either they're overtly hostile, like bacteria, viruses, and predators, or they are utterly indifferent, like the solar cycle, like the weather, like meteors coming and bopping you on the head.
Yes.
So if you take all that for granted, then the betterment of humanity and the betterment of yourself comes through exerting control over the indifferent forces of nature and the hostile competitors out there. So this births an ideology of human advancement and progress that actually feeds into progressive politics to the extent that it identifies with science's campaign to master reality. So progress is seen as progress in more and more control. So you progress in medicine as you control body processes, you insulate yourself from harmful pathogens, you cut out parts that are malfunctioning, you dominate the body with pharmaceutical medicine, like you get control, you change the genes, you engineer the genes, and progress means you extend that control farther and farther onto the genetic and molecular and even atomic level. That would be progress. Social progress would mean that you exert beneficent control, like, you're trying to do good. So that's why you want to monitor and surveil every action, record every financial transaction, like get it all into a database, link everything in an internet of things, so that like there can't be crime anymore, there can't be violence anymore, because it's all monitored.
Yeah.
We can administer things rationally and maximize the greatest good for the greatest number. All we have to do is measure everything. Like the idea to turn everything into data, that's also a form of control. So but where it comes from is this basic view of who we are, separate selves in a universe of other. Once you take that for granted, the whole tower of fear and control is inevitable.
Yeah.
And that's why what I like to say, like the revolution in human beingness is so important. Without that, then none of this is going to change. And the change comes from a deeper understanding of who we actually are and what the world actually is.
Yeah. And we're all beginning to remember. And I wanted just to honor you for, allowing this information to come through you. And we end every podcast with a segment called the Final Trio, which are essentially 3 rapid fire questions that you can answer in any way that you want. But before that, I really wanted to allow people to know where they can find you, where they can connect with you even further, get deeper into your work. Obviously, this is a must read, I think, for anyone in these next generations, just to have really special in my heart. And I really, wanted to have that recommendation, just because it's been such an impactful book. Where would you send people to connect with you further?
I guess my website, charleseisenstein.org, my YouTube channel, maybe, Substack. I post on Substack, charleseisenstein.substack. You'll find me if you search for me.
Yes. And then we're also going to link the Gathering of the Tribe video because we've been talking about it for sure. So the final trio, I love this part. The first one I wanted to ask you is, you talked about miracle workers and how the world needs to open up to more miracles in our life. And I wanted to ask you, what has been the most significant miracle that you've witnessed in the last 12 months to 2 years?
It just brings up like, okay, it's hard for me to just rapid fire. There isn't a most significant miracle. I can sort through the various synchronicities and amazing events. Yeah, I would say personally significant for me are those times where I really let go of making anything happen, and I had a perfect day. Like, things happened beyond what I could have contrived.
Yeah.
And it was significant to me because it was like this nudge. See, Charles, you don't have to be in control.
Bit of that surrendering of what the day, what does the unknown hold for our lives?
Yeah. It was like, trust the process. Doesn't mean that I didn't do anything, but I just trusted, okay, now I do something.
Yes.
Now I go here.
Yeah.
But trust.
I love that. The second one, you talk a lot about attention. So I wanted to ask you, what is one thing that we can all start to pay attention to in the years ahead and in our personal lives, and bring awareness to that?
I would suggest paying attention to habits of judgment of other people. Notice when you are in judgment. Notice when you are seeking to understand a situation by finding the bad guy.
The other. Yeah.
Yeah, like trying, like that, maybe that's another thing, like the habit of, I'll say it again, seeking to understand a situation by looking for who's the bad guy.
That's deep. I want to let that kind of sink in. The third question requires us to time travel a little bit. Let's say 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And if I were to give you a time capsule, and with this time capsule, you can place anything from a physical object, a poem, a word, a phrase, really anything, infinite possibilities that you could put in this time capsule. And this time capsule in the future will be opened by the harbingers of the future, the seeds of the new story, the seeds of the future that will come into these change maker positions for the years to come and the next generations to come. What would you include, or maybe not include, in this time capsule?
10 or 15 years, you said, yeah?
Yeah.
I will put a pebble in the time capsule that is impregnated with the knowledge of our fundamental innocence.
Ooh. Let's leave it at that. Wow. I'll be chewing on that when I go back to edit this.
Yeah. And many people can take that away,
Yeah.
like you can actually, like what I said makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Don't try too hard to understand it.
Huh.
Yeah. Don't try too hard to understand it, but there's this pebble.
Yeah.
And your fundamental innocence.
Mm. And as we set the intention at the beginning of this episode, to use this episode as like an initiation for people, I feel like a big part of being initiated into a new phase in our life is to reflect. And you mentioned a lot of big questions that we can ask ourselves during these transitory times. What is one question that you would leave for anyone tuning in today? They can just ask themselves whenever they need to.
Initiation, part of the process is breakdown, separation, bewilderment. I guess the question would be, what do I want?
What do I really want? Yeah.
Yeah. What do I really want? And ask in a way that doesn't judge the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I listened to you say that once in an interview, and that question goes deep because you can ask it in any aspect of your life, whether it's, your relationship, what do you really want in a relationship, to even where you want to live, what type of lifestyle you want to have, like, what do you really want? And I've tried to come at that question from a very like blank slate, maybe even like in the early morning of the day. And I was really surprised to see, what came through when asking that question. So thank you for mentioning that and asking that. Much love, brother. Thank you. Truly, I really appreciate, your presence here, your wisdom, and I feel really blessed that we get the chance to co-create and expand this message even further.
Yeah. Well, I am honored as well to be present with you.
Thank you so much.